My husband just inherited $800 million, and he wants me to follow him. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by paperwork when my phone buzzed. The name flashing across the screen made my stomach twist. My husband. Normally, I would have ignored it. He called incessantly, sometimes just to ask what I wanted for dinner or to brag about trivial accomplishments. But that day, something compelled me to answer. I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Babe, I just inherited $800 million. Pack your things, we're moving immediately. I froze. The words echoed in my head like a surreal melody. $800 million, that wasn't just a fortune, it was a universe of possibilities. My life, our life, had been ordinary, struggling, predictable, and suddenly everything had changed. Wait, what? My voice barely rose above a whisper. It's true, he said, excitement bubbling over. It's my uncle, he passed, and I'm the only heir. You have to trust me, get ready. I hung up. My coffee had gone cold. My mind raced, but not in the way he expected. I should have been thrilled. I should have been overjoyed. But the truth was, I felt a spark of something far stronger than excitement. Anger. All the times he had dismissed me, laughed at my ambitions, made me feel small, they all surged back. And now he wanted me to pack my things and follow him like some obedient shadow because he was rich. I realized then that this inheritance wasn't just about money. It was an opportunity, not for luxury, but for power, for control, for revenge. That night I lay beside him, pretending to sleep. He murmured in his sleep about yachts, mansions, and private jets. I listened silently, a slow, deliberate smile forming. He had no idea I was already plotting. The next morning, I started observing him more closely. His arrogance had grown with the inheritance. He strutted around our apartment, talking about his fortune as though it had always been owed to him. Every word, every gesture became ammunition for my plan. I pretended to be ecstatic, packing bags and researching estates, all while learning everything I could about his uncle's fortune. Investments, real estate holdings, offshore accounts, everything. I also looked into the family dynamics. There were grudges, old debts, and legal loopholes that he, in his overconfidence, hadn't noticed. I contacted key people subtly. A lawyer here, a business associate there, never outright lying, just hinting at caution and strategy. I watched as his ego inflated with every interaction, blissfully unaware that I was silently tightening a net around him. By the third week, cracks started appearing. Investors who had quietly suffered under his recklessness began whispering doubts. Old family members resurfaced, curious about the fortune. He remained completely oblivious, convinced that his charm and newfound wealth could conquer all. I played the perfect supportive wife, smiling, laughing at his jokes, marveling at his success. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything: financial statements, communications, contracts. Every mistake, every vulnerability would be used later. Then came the gala. He insisted I attend, showing off his fortune to everyone in his social circle. The moment he stepped onto the red carpet, I saw him through a new lens, vulnerable, exposed, entirely dependent on perception. People whispered about his past failures, his impulsive decisions. He tried to smile, tried to maintain control, but the cracks were visible. I approached him with a perfect mix of admiration and concern. "You're amazing," I said. "But are you sure everything is secure?" He laughed, brushing me off. "Of course, nothing can touch me now." I nodded, concealing the thrill of control. Nothing could touch me either. I was already in control. Over the next few months, I escalated the plan. I discreetly reminded key family members of forgotten debts. I subtly encouraged business associates to double-check accounts. I even leaked tiny, untraceable hints of potential legal issues, just enough to make him anxious, just enough to make others doubt him. He started turning to me for guidance, unaware that I was orchestrating the chaos. His panic was slow to surface, but inevitable. Every time he called me in distress, I would smile softly, offering calm, practical advice. Behind the mask of support, I held all the cards. The breaking point came during an important board meeting. He was presenting his new investment strategy to major stakeholders, expecting applause and admiration. Instead, questions about past mismanagement and overlooked contracts erupted. Whispers turned into tense murmurs, murmurs into outright skepticism. He turned to me, panic-stricken. "What's happening? Why didn't anyone tell?" Smiled, serene and innocent. "You always said you wanted me to support you," I said. "I'm just helping you see the full picture before it's too late." The end of that day, his reputation had shifted. Investors pulled out, lawyers questioned the legitimacy of certain holdings, and family members demanded oversight. He had nowhere to turn except to me, and he didn't realize that the help he was begging for was the very hand that had orchestrated his downfall. Months passed. I had maneuvered quietly, subtly, ensuring that I gained not only control over the fortune but also the respect, fear, and dependence of everyone around him. His arrogance was broken, his power diminished, and all of it was because I had waited, planned, and executed with patience. I sat in the new mansion, overlooking the city, reflecting on the journey. The woman who had once been dismissed, ignored, and underestimated was now in command of an empire worth hundreds of millions. I had used wealth not for vanity or luxury, but as leverage to claim my power and independence. He looked at me differently now, sometimes with awe, sometimes with quiet resentment, but mostly with understanding. I was no longer the woman he thought he could control. And in that quiet, victorious moment, I realized something crucial. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience, strategy, and timing. I had mastered all three. Because in a world driven by greed, ego, and money, the one who understands power is always the one who wins. After months of careful planning, subtle manipulation, and watching him spiral into overconfidence, the moment of reckoning had finally arrived. My husband, once arrogant and untouchable, had started to crumble under the weight of his own ego and the consequences of his reckless decisions. And I had never felt more alive. It started with a family meeting. His relatives, long ignored, were suddenly curious and a little vindictive. They questioned his management of the inheritance, hinting at old debts and legal obligations. I had prepared everything, emails, contracts, and documentation, so that every claim they made would land perfectly, exposing his mistakes without ever implicating me. He tried to argue, to charm, even to intimidate, but it was useless. Every word he spoke only tightened the web around him. Watching him panic, truly panic, was intoxicating. I had never wanted him destroyed for the sake of cruelty. I wanted him to see the consequences of underestimating me, of thinking I was insignificant. Now he realized, too late, that the woman he dismissed for years was the one holding all the power. Then came the board of the company he had impulsively bought after inheriting part of his fortune. I sat beside him, smiling, pretending to be supportive as I subtly guided conversations. Every question I planted, every doubt I encouraged among the investors, worked like clockwork. By the end of the meeting, some of his most trusted allies were questioning him openly. He glanced at me, eyes wide, and for a split second I saw fear. That night, when we returned home to the mansion he had once boasted about, I poured us both a glass of wine and sat beside him on the terrace overlooking the city. He was quiet, his usual arrogance replaced with tension. "Babe," he started, his voice faltering. I don't understand. Everything seemed fine, and now." I placed my hand gently over his, smiling softly. "Honey, sometimes we don't see the full picture, but that's why I'm here." Looked at me, desperate, but I didn't flinch. "You've always been my rock," he added, almost pleading. Inside, I laughed silently. My rock, yes, but not in the way he imagined. I was the storm now. I had orchestrated everything, and yet he didn't even realize I had done it. The next weeks were the final act. I worked behind the scenes to ensure legal and financial control was mine. I restructured his holdings subtly, placed oversight boards, and ensured that I was the one making key decisions. Friends, family, investors, they all came to me for guidance, and each time he tried to intervene, he was politely sidelined. One evening, he confronted me in the study, his voice trembling. This isn't what I wanted. Why are you doing this?" I looked at him calmly, almost pitying. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said. "I'm doing this because I finally realized what I'm worth, and you never understood that." Sank into the chair, defeated. For the first time in our marriage, he had no words. The arrogance that had defined him for years had crumbled. He knew he was no longer in control. And in that moment, I savored a quiet satisfaction. Justice, not cruelty, had been served. Months later, I walked through the mansion, reviewing financial statements, making calls, overseeing decisions. The empire was mine, not because of cruelty, but because of strategy, patience, and understanding the game of power. He was still here, my husband in name, but the dynamic had shifted completely. He respected me now. Not out of fear or obligation, but because he realized I was always one step ahead, always in control. And in those quiet, victorious moments, I understood the truth. Revenge is not about anger. It's about timing, preparation, and recognizing your own worth. I had transformed from the overlooked, underestimated wife into the woman who commanded an empire and shaped her own destiny. He had inherited $800 million, yes, but I had inherited something far greater: respect, power, and freedom. And in a world where money, ego, and deception reign, I had finally won. As I looked out at the city lights that night, a calm sense of triumph washed over me. The woman who had been dismissed, ignored, and underestimated for so long was gone. In her place stood someone unstoppable, and the world, with all its challenges, had no idea how powerful I had become. The storm had arrived, and I was at the center of it,